boring legal disclaimer that we have to read at the start of every one. All views expressed are our own and do not represent the opinions of any employers, organisations, or clients for whom we work. Any recommendations or advice given in this podcast may or may not be right for you, depending on your circumstances. Please bear this in mind before taking any action. Charting Tracks is brought to you by Amir Yaqub, Chris O'Gorman, and Ben Hennessy-Garside. Amir is a record producer, Grammy Award-winning engineer, a co-owner of Bison Productions recording studios in East London, and the director of Garnish Music Production School in London. Chris is a digital marketing strategist and digital manager. He's previously worked for Sony Music and was the head of digital at Capitol Records UK. He currently runs a digital marketing agency and develops music artists, working on brand development and marketing strategy. Ben is me, I is Ben. I'm a singing coach, multi-instrumentalist, composer and producer. In the past, I've worked in music instrument retail as a record label scout, a live sound engineer, and I'm currently a lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire, teaching voice to popular music students alongside being a dad and a husband. This is the 12th episode of Charting Tracks and is the third of 3 in which we discuss the art of performance. Now, I also want to talk about psychology and the warm up is kind of quite a nice place to be doing some of that stuff, but we've touched on it a little bit with kind of getting into the song so that you can perform it. But there's another piece here too, which is perhaps around performance anxiety or the opposite of that, right? Which is confidence on stage and getting into that place where you can be that, you can be in control in the way that Amir was describing earlier. Any expertise here in terms of anxiety management? Have you had an experience maybe, Amir, where...
I have, yeah.
Yeah. And because I know that's a job of a producer, isn't it? Is to kind of help manage the psychology of a recording session. So
I mean, luckily, I have good experience with vocalists, and knowing that the mind again will come back to the thing about being an athlete and stuff. If the mind is in a different place to where you're supposed to be, essentially, you're not going to get the performance right. This is why sports performance psychology is so amazing and links very closely with music psychology and performance, or music performance psychology, should I say. I've had a few occasions, and I'm not going to name any names. I was working with a vocalist, and we were going over stuff, and she was in the booth, and it just so happened that I felt I didn't even have to, not because I'm not looking at the vocalist, I didn't even have to ask a question or anything like that. I felt the energy, take after take, it started to take a dip, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? And at some point, when she was supposed to come in for the line, she didn't come in, so I stopped. I turned around and she was crying. And it just so happened that she was feeling a level of anxiety because she thought we were on a tight schedule. She wasn't getting the line the way that I wanted, and I was working with one other vocal producer as well. We were vocal producing together. And she'd got in her head, and she got anxious about timings and schedules and can we get back in the studio? And she's gone through this whole story in her own mind. And obviously to me, particularly, and to my co-vocal producer, it was no big deal.
Yeah.
It was really no big deal. We knew that she's a phenomenal vocalist, and it's no big deal. We knew we'd get it, and we thought we'd get it in that day and on that time. Plus, she'd been going through other things in her life, other personal things, and I felt like it all just came out in that moment. It's like watching something or listening to something happen in front of you, and the anxiety of all of that, of course, but just generally issues to do with mental health that had been affecting her at this time had started to come out, and I just said, listen, don't worry. I gave her a hug. I said, don't worry, it's cool. No pressure. Go home, come back tomorrow, and let's just start again. Fresh day, fresh energy. Let's just do that. So that's obviously one example, and there's a few. Some of them are, maybe even a little bit more severe than that, and maybe some are less. But one thing that we have to understand is particularly the voice as an instrument, particularly the voice, is such a personal instrument that anything that happens within you, my experience is that anything that's happening, anything that's going on in your life, if you're unable to separate it, and that's perfectly fine if you are, it's going to affect your performance because you might not be able to produce the sounds that you want to produce. And actually, if I'm honest, the sounds that we were asking to be produced weren't that demanding. They weren't high notes. They weren't anything outside of the range. It was just one of those situations where there was just too much going on in the mind to get that performance anywhere close to where it could be. And eventually, obviously, the next day, what happened was we got the performance in like 2 takes, because there was also a level of comfort as well. I guess as a producer, you have to often push an artist, but you have to make them feel secure. And it's that kind of like the love of a father almost. And obviously, I've experienced situations where actually being even slightly forceful, slightly aggressive has caused someone to snap and I mean completely break down into tears because it reminds them of a bad experience they might have had with a family member like their father. And so there's a lot of psychology, and I think we've spoken before, not necessarily on the podcast, about how your body holds a lot of trauma as well. And the traumas of life. And it holds a lot of that. And because your voice is part of your body and your mind is connected to your voice and all of that stuff, I've seen it happen on more than one occasion. And to varying degrees, some people are just like, I need to step out for 10 minutes and do whatever. And other people are just like completely broken down in front of you. It's very, very attached.
Yeah, and I mean, for vocalists, it's there's a lot of connection, but then for other musicians as well, right? Because if you're getting the shakes, if you're holding tension in kind of weird places, that means that your fingers can't do the things that you want them to do, and all of this can be caused by psychology, and it's just really, really important that we acknowledge that it exists and it will impact and affect your creative output in numerous and different ways. So if you need to get therapy, get therapy. If stuff like meditation, there are kind of combined practices. I mean, so for singers, stuff like yoga is great, really good, because you're doing a lot of the body stretching and the work, and there's core work in that as well, which will support your body for singing. And there's this kind of spiritual meditative piece in the yoga tradition. Depends on the type of yoga, of course, but in the yoga tradition, which is usually beneficial. So, I mean, some examples in the voice, when you're, one of the ways in which you prevent yourself from crying, for example, is often it's in locking down the tongue root and like clenching the larynx in a certain position. And so if you've got somebody that's been holding back tears a lot, that's just a physical example. The way that they hold back tears, like physiologically, is by not allowing the vocal mechanism to move freely.
Wow.
And so if there's that's an example of a psychological issue turning up in the body and affecting
a physical manifestation.
A physical manifestation. Yeah, and of course, as already mentioned, shakes, tensions, for instruments other than voice as well. But it's just some people, unfortunately, still haven't grasped this thing that mental health exists, psychology
it's a real
exists.
thing,
What's going on in your mind can find its way into your body. It's just a recognition that your psychology matters.
Yes.
Not just in terms of the kind of creative output that you've got going on, whether that's in the writing of songs or whether that's in the meaning behind the lyrics you're writing or the emotional swells in the material, like not just the emotional and creative decisions that you make, but also like the nuts and bolts physical kind of, I need to get my body by moving this piece of my body, whether it's in your voice or in your arms or in your hands, I need to move my body in such a way that it makes the sound that I want it to make. Your body is going to be impacted by your psychology.
Yeah, of course.
This thing about us being, we are mind bodies. We're not just a mind and we're not just a body. Like there are links between the two, and I think it's just really important that people acknowledge that our psychology matters, and so we ought to be keeping an eye on that piece of the picture.
Yeah, definitely.
And recognizing that for ourselves and those around us, whether they're bandmates, whether they're anyone that we're working with in the music industry, is that their psychology is going to affect stuff. Yeah, and so just acknowledging that we are psychological beings.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one thing that makes things worse is obviously being in pressurized situations. So whether that's a performance of the studio degree or the live degree, I think obviously kind of finding ways to cope with that if you want to be a professional musician is what you're going to have to do, and finding techniques to deal with that, like many people that I know who actually work in live music, whether they're instrumentalists or vocalists, as it were, they'll feel nervous all the time. And it's like, you wouldn't actually think it when they're on stage, but they do feel nervous and they do feel perhaps shy and stuff like that. There's loads of techniques given by lots of different people that can help you to cope with that. But and this is like, I guess this is the ironic thing, given everything that we've spoken about. There will be people who seem like they're so incredibly confident on that stage who are actually absolutely pooping themselves, They've learned to cope with things they might feel. And that happens obviously in the studio as well. I know that these pressurized situations can definitely get on top of people and add to what is already there. But definitely one of the things that Ben mentioned was yoga is and meditation as part of a yoga practice is a good thing to add on, or just meditation by itself. But there are many things that you can do, and therapy, obviously.
Yeah. Yep.
There's, in my personal experience, therapy has been very helpful in uncovering things that may affect you and your job, which if you are a singer, that's your job, right? And learning how to deal with that kind of stuff, giving you mechanisms to cope. Maybe you could go on stage 100 times in your lifetime, and even on that 100th time, you feel equally as nervous as or full of anxiety as you were in the first. But at least you got up on that stage 100 times and you did it because you found ways to cope with it and deal with it.
Yeah, and there's something about nerves and anxiety which can be reframed as excitement.
Yep.
That a lot of the, like, it feels bodily quite similar, anxiety and excitement.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that.
You know, like, I'm not a performance psychologist, and I'm not a therapist or a, you know, so, you know, with that caveat, sometimes that reframing can work. So maybe you feel fear and you think what you're feeling is fear, but see if you can check in with that and just ask, well, is this definitely fear? Or is this actually excitement?
Yes.
You know, like, if you're a bit twitchy before you're due to go and perform, well, that might be because you're really looking forward to the thing, and it's like, this is going to be great, you know. So that can help, and people devise strategies for, like, taking that energy, the energy that you get from a heightened emotional state, whether it's anxiety or whatever else it might be, and redirecting it somehow. And yeah, I mean, one way is practice, and also reflection. Yeah.
And also what I found works for a lot of people, myself included, is routine. So warm up, think of practice, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're both structured, they're routines that you can start to build in. So because you have a sense of normalcy around this thing that you're going to do, it's actually going to help you to cope with that a lot easier as well.
Right. Yeah. And if you're on tour and you're in a different, you know, you're in a different, I don't know, like, changing room, or maybe you're not in a changing room tonight. Maybe you're sat in the back of your car, or you're in some bog in some little venue somewhere, or like whatever it is, wherever you are. There's a certain amount of anxiety and excitement, buzzing around just the fact you're in a new place. And so, yeah, having that that warm up routine is kind of it's like a centering thing. It's just reminding you that you're still you, and that you have some control over your environment. And yeah, so having, and if you're going to do something like that, why not make it into a warm up or something that's going to benefit you in the performance as well?
Yeah.
So this phrase, killing two birds with one stone, comes to mind, you know. If you can have a little mantra that centers you, and so helps you kind of psychologically and spiritually, but also is a
physically gets your body ready.
Yeah, to like is a warm up process. Then why not?
One of the things that I've heard and seen particularly with mantras, it doesn't have to be like anything like too, you know, woo woo or anything like that, but it can just be like a statement which hacks you into thinking a certain way. So if you say, you know, you can turn around and take anxiety as one of the things. You can say, this is not anxiety, this is excitement, and bang, you're automatically in a mindset, because you've reprogrammed to a certain extent and reframed the way that thing is occurring, and now you're using it to your advantage, as it were. There's loads of techniques and stuff like that fall under psychology. They fall under NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I found that in any situation when you have to deal with any thing that can be considered, you know, mental health, anxiety or depression or anything like that, having a sense of routine is a good way to deal with things. Prevention is better than cure as well.
Yeah. Sure.
So it can help you to prevent reoccurring episodes of whatever it is you're going through.
Yeah. I think awareness is all like just just trying to be aware of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because it's not a normal, like, to go through this process, it's not, necessarily the normal thing for a human body to do, is to get up on a stage in front of thousands of people. That isn't, quote unquote normal. To be on the cover of magazines, to be on TV, to be, doing interviews where your every little word is being dissected and stuff, to be have a huge social media presence where you have fans coming at you every single day and non-fans coming at you every single day. Those things aren't, necessarily the human mind is necessarily designed for. Doesn't mean that you can't find ways to cope, but it's actually, I wish it was taken more seriously, because the amount of artists that kind of at the start of their journey and they kind of go through, and if they have success, and then they kind of, it's really weird adjustments that you have to make, and it's it's hard to be well adjusted at the end of it, because it is so strange, and so what those things kind of do to your brain, and and then the inevitable kind of turning to drugs and alcohol and things like that to kind of prescribe, take the edge off and stuff. And actually, so I think like being aware of kind of what you're feeling is the kind of a lot of it actually just being aware. I'm just going, okay, I'm feeling like this. That's all right. I'm about to go on stage. It's normal that I would feel that way. That's okay. Rather than, I feel something weird. Give me that vodka.
Right. And and it's no
I do
surprise.
see a lot of artists that kind of turn to those things. Who are like, let's just dull that and then heighten that for that.
Yep.
And I think it is something that actually is finally being taken more and more seriously. And I've got to tell you, there'd be a lot of bands that were still together, that would still be together now, and artists that would still be walking this earth that aren't, if those things if that had been taken more seriously,
and also normalized and
normalized. Yeah.
One thing you said, Chris, which speaks to me and should speak to everyone, is that it's okay for you to feel a certain way,
Yeah. And like it should be just as normal as like I hurt my shoulder when I was playing drums. Okay, I'm going to go to the doctor and have a look at it, go to the physio. Like it should be just as normal. If you feel that you have debilitating anxiety before a performance, or that's okay to get that looked at as well, and to see it should be just as normal as going to the doctors, to the dentist, or to the
right,
the ear, nose and throat doctor as well, to look at your vocal cords if you've got bit of vocal strain or whatever. It should be just as normal part, and it slowly is. And actually, that having a psychologist on the artist team is, maybe not full time on the artist team, but certainly as part of the artist team, is actually becoming a bit more commonplace.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Why not? Why would you not think as deeply and hardly and about who your therapist is going to be as you would your lawyer or your accountant or your manager,
my radio plugger, or my exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
100%. Absolutely. I can't stress that enough. How important it is to keep your mind as well oiled and taken care of as your instrument. Yeah.
And labels are getting better at this. Actually, is they're making these resources available to artists, especially when they, because they know they're going to be put through this machine, and everything that goes with that, and it's so a lot of labels, especially for the younger acts that are coming through as well, when it's like you're at a really impressionable stage where your psychological development is, it's such a crucial time, and it's like to be going and having this, to be put through the kind of music promotion machine, and then to come out the other side of it, it's actually best for it. It's good for everyone, because it's good for the artist, it's good for the fans because their artists can make the music they like, and it's good for the label because they can keep making money because that band will stay together longer. So it's a no-brainer, really. It's for sure. Yeah, so it's slow. It is starting to, like I said, be taken more seriously and be as normal part of the team as anyone else.
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. So I've got a few more things here. I wanted to talk about the stage and using the stage and the importance in performance of the stage. And just with that, it's this thing about your performance as well as being a musical performance. It's also a visual one. And even to the extent, I mean, even in the studio, and I know, Amir, you've talked a lot about how it doesn't matter. But I remember when we were talking about recording, I think it was recording last time. It could have been one of the earlier ones, but you were talking about an artist who liked to have nothing but a candle. So pure black, apart from a candle. And so this thing about staging, like that's an act of staging, right? Like,
oh yeah, of course it is.
You know, you're altering the lighting, and you're placing a specific type of object in a specific place, which has a specific valence to it and a specific meaning. And so even just in shaping the artist's performance, there's something about the stage, something about the positioning of things on the stage or in the stage space that matter. But then also, of course, for the audience as well, in cases where you're performing in a live setting, and you've got your fans kind of being voyeurs and you're into your creative process. The staging is an important piece there too, right?
Definitely.
So what do we think about that?
Yeah, just to go back, but not overly talk about it, because we talked about it quite a lot in the previous episode about the studio, particularly setting the stage for your performance, whatever that might be. I think it's just a huge part. It kind of goes back into the psychology of things a little bit as well, because psychologically, if you can feel comfortable, if you can feel secure that you have something that you know and something that brings out the best in you, and as part of your ritual, as part of your routine, that can be a great thing. Some of it is purely practical. I need to have water next to me. Yeah. Of course, you need to do that because you need to hydrate yourself, right? I think taking it onto the stage is where creativity can really shine. There's shows that I've seen that are just visually just stunning. And that just is part of the artistry of any given person. It can be, at times it can be to convey a political message. I think Massive Attack did a political statement on one of their live shows a few years back. But again, we can have practical considerations as well. So if I am the artist or the singer and I'm going away and I want my MD, I want to be able to see my musical director at all times, because they're the ones who are leading all of the cues for the rest of the band. Right. So there can be that kind of stuff as well, that we have to think about visually. Yes, of course, if you want to produce something with loads of visuals, and a huge visual production, is going to cost you money. But even now, even at a stage, if you don't have a big money kind of backing or machine behind you, you can of course be really creative, and something as simple as tying a scarf around your mic stand, that can separate you from other people. Other people aren't doing it. One thing that one of the greatest showmen in the world was known for doing, Freddie Mercury, was taking his mic stand and taking it off and having just a half of the stand and the boom arm. Yeah. And I thought that was brilliant. His
sort of trademark, didn't it? Yeah.
No one else can do it now without now going, he's doing a Freddie Mercury.
Right.
Or someone like Mick Jagger just dancing around like an idiot around stage. Even that. That's visual, and it's obviously commanding and all of those kind of things that I would look for in personally from a performance. But also it's unique a lot of the time as well. And I think that's what you're going to have to work out when you're staging stuff. How can you be unique? Many people now have their band name on the kick drum.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's a marketing opportunity as well. Actually, the staging is a massive marketing opportunity. So yes, you're seeing much more like the branding on the kick drum and stuff, and on the backdrop, and having their social media handles and stuff on the backdrop or on the drum. So that and then I think like it's also an opportunity to establish your artist identity and your archetype again. I remember like somebody like, I don't know why it's popping into my head when you said scarf around the mic stand, just reminded me of Joss Stone, and it was like
yeah, that's true.
The marketing with Joss Stone was like, she's this sort of hippy dippy 60s, late 60s, early 70s flower child, peace and love,
Yeah, and did she perform with no shoes on most of the time?
She always performed, and that was the thing. She was like, I have to perform in bare feet.
Yeah.
I don't know if she really did. And to be honest, I don't think that she thinks there's some magical power coming through the earth that she had to have bare feet for, but it fit the archetype, and it fit the branding. So sure, she's going to be in bare feet, and she's going to have a scarf around the mic stand. She's going to have rugs, and she's going to have some throws and stuff, and she's going to have some incense burning, because that's establishing the brand, establishing the archetype. So it's a nice fit, and and then like I think there are. I could say you know obviously you have these huge productions, but then another one I think of is Lady Gaga when you're talking about that. But actually, before, back in the day when she was just doing her little dive bar gigs, and one of the things she always talks about is how the staging mate, because she'd be there playing the piano, and she's like, no one's listening, and it's like, what can I do to get their attention? And so I think they took a break, and she came back after the intermission, whatever, after the little gap, and she just came out in a sweat and her bikini, basically.
Wow!
Just like, okay, now they're listening. Okay,
yeah, for
and then
sure.
Each time she's like, what can I do each time to kind of, and so it might be like having, some crazy paper mache thing all over the piano. So it's like, the hell is that? Or the things that used to, she was like, how can I create my own pyrotechnics? And the big thing she always used to do was do not try this at home, legal disclaimer, but lighting hairspray on fire on stage to kind of make her own pyrotechnics and stuff like that, and just doing crazy stuff like that to kind of be like, because she was always like, I want to be the show person, I want to create a visual, something. And it's always just doing different stuff like that, making outfits out of disco balls, and like coming up with basically having a very little space in these little dive bars, and finding a way to, how can I turn that into like, the Wembley Stadium stage? How can I make that stand out?
And when you're performing, you've been given this place.
Yeah. It's yours. Do what you want with it.
Right. You've somebody said, you take that piece of real estate, even if it's just for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with it? Yeah.
How are you going to dress it? How are you going to put your mark on it? How are you going to, because the thing is, people will look at that and they'll get a sense of what type of artist you are quite quickly before you've even sung or played a note.
Definitely.
So it is the stage is a real branding opportunity, actually. And the fact that you can now have your stage, you can have a pop-up stage, you can, it really is, it really is a marketing and branding opportunity. And I think it's good for us to think about it that way. Yeah.
I mean, I just, and this is just because of who I am, right? But this stuff about branding and marketing, and I know, and I mean, no disrespect to you, Chris. There's a reason why you're doing your job and I'm doing mine, right? But I get this kind of like kind of sensation with that side of things. But so the reason I'm saying this is because brand or no brand, like marketing or no marketing, it's a creative outlet. And really, marketing and branding is just a piece of that as well. And so the reason I'm saying this is if like me, you get a kind of, anyone listening or watching get a kind of like, kind of response to plastering your Facebook stuff all over the place and doing that. Okay, okay, but at the very least, use it creatively to support what you're doing artistically.
And there are always creative ways to do it. And if somebody tells me, if an artist tries and tells me, oh, I don't want to do that because it's not creative, I'm like, you're an artist, find a creative way to do it, because there are so many. Like Kate Nash, for instance, always used to go, and she used to do this when she was playing these little pubs in London, and I remember it well. She had this little neon sign that she'd obviously had made, and it had I don't know if it was just her name or if I'm pretty sure it was like her Twitter handle or something like that, and it looked so cool. It was just a simple, this like neon writing sign, and she used to bring it up with her everywhere she went, and she used to plug it in and put it up, and everyone would be like, oh, and straight away people would be paying attention. And it's a simple little thing, and it was creative, and it was in pink cool neon writing, and it was
Great. Yeah, absolutely. That's the response.
Creative way of doing it. There's always a creative way of doing it. And the more ways you try and do, and actually if they do feel that kind of like, oh, that feels like really, that's good. Find a way to do it then that doesn't make you feel like that.
I tell you something that kind of sums this up really nicely. When I was in New York, I went to BB King's bar, and I was there just watching. It was a Wednesday night, and there was a guy on who was part of a blues band and stuff like that, and he was no one that I knew of. Or he was a great musician. So what he did was, it's funny when we talk about staging, we talk about things that might be static, but he was moving around quite a bit. He came out into the audience, and he came to me, and in fact, I think he came to my girlfriend at the time, and he gave her his plectrum, and he asked her to strum the guitar, which she did, and then he moved the fingers around and playing notes and whatever, and then he just turned and walked away and went to somebody else, pulled out another plectrum.
Clever. Yeah.
And on the plectrum, it had everything about him: his name, his Facebook page, all of that kind of stuff.
There you go. That's a creative, fun way of doing it.
That is so memorable that I remember it to this day.
Yeah.
I don't remember who he is because I didn't go back and check that. But I remember it being a great way to do something, which is actually, Ben said, to a lot of people, it might be a bit of a bore or it might give them the creeps or whatever, but it was brilliant. I loved it.
It's a creative way to do something that's, it's an interactive way of doing it. It involves it into rather than just handing out business cards. Like, number one, it's plectrum.
Yeah.
Fun. If you're not even a guitarist, like you're like, oh, plectrum, that's quite cool.
It's like memorabilia, isn't it?
A little thing. It's little, and
I mean, we were there from London as well, so it could be like a little memorabilia from our trip.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. There are always, and as soon as you start thinking about creative ways, you'll find that you come up with loads of ideas of how you can do something creatively and how you can incorporate it. And another simple thing actually is, and it's incredible how often this doesn't happen, is artists say your name on the stage.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've seen an act that I really like, and I might be passing for, especially if it's at a festival or a, something kind of where there's more than one main stage, and I'm like just passing through. Particularly, actually, at the Great Escape in Brighton, which is you're going in one venue to another, you're going to catch a couple of songs, and the amount of times I've been like, "Ooh, I like this. I have to go to this next thing because I've got an artist performing on that stage that I have to be there for." But and I'm like, there's nothing to tell me your name, and I'm about to leave, and I'm not going to know who you are, so I'm going to have to go out of my way to go. And it's like, actually. And I've definitely seen artists do a full set and not even once mention their name.
Yeah.
Other than when they were introduced in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, because it feels cringe to them, and it feels sort of like. But it's like, make it easy for people to find you.
Yeah, of course.
I was there wanting to find this artist, and wasn't given the most basic thing, which was what their name was, so I can then go and find them afterwards online.
There's a creative way to do that. Have your band have one of your songs that you turn into a jam, and then just introduce your band. That's that person. My name is blah 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 blah. See you next time. Good night.
Yeah. There's a fun, creative way to work it in. It doesn't have to be like, I'm so and so. Follow me on. There'll be fun ways. creative ways to do it, and it's part of it should be part of the performance, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you're a new developing act, it should be part of your performance.
Definitely.
Because why are you performing if you don't want people to find you?
True.
If you don't want people to hear you.
Very true.
Oh, that's another good question, and there'll be people out there answering it.
Yeah,
that's fine for them.
I'm interested though. I'm interested.
Yeah,
maybe there are. I'd love to hear those people actually, because they might be like, I like performing, and maybe see, the thing is here is there's even an angle here as well, because maybe that's the mystery that you're building up, and it's like, and fine, but you'll be doing that as a strategy, and it'll be a kind of like
it'll be thought out at least.
It'll be thought out. It'll be like and there'll be a whole creative sort of impetus behind it.
Yes.
Rather than just, oops, I forgot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's it. Digital performance, Chris. Like in the lead up to this, you talked about this. We're in this new world of Zoom and live streaming, and this is what feels to me, because I'm an old git, like a new digital performance space that we can occupy. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because
I think that's the thing, because we were talking about performance, and people think of it as live performance in a venue, in a space, and actually it's increasingly, obviously, there are opportunities for YouTube Live or Instagram Live or even paid. And I talk about, obviously, our post-COVID, like the huge loss in the damage that's been done to the live sector of music, with venues not being able to open, not being able to have gigs. And actually, the response to that is, one of innovation. And normally innovation comes at times when, out of necessity. And actually kind of what you're seeing is like artists kind of trying to replace some of that sort of gig, money that they used to get for ticket sales and stuff, actually with digital gigs and with selling tickets, to come and join, maybe to be in a Zoom, as a private Zoom gig or something where they can have, up to 100 attendees or something. And maybe like your ticket is a little bit less expensive, or a fair bit less expensive than it would be for a live show. But, it's a way that actually artists are then still providing still doing a gig, still doing a full performance, and it can be done online, whether it's via Zoom, whether it's via Instagram Live, YouTube Live, Twitch is another one where, as Mia said earlier, lots of it's being embraced by particularly a lot of DJs actually, and I guess because it kind of fits with the gaming sort of genre that Twitch is for. But there's this whole sort of online performance vehicle that's available to artists, and you can be doing like an Instagram Live and reach like thousands of people. And a gig, you might have a few hundred people, maybe, if it's, the opportunities are there, and like the technology is there, and it's the difficulty then obviously is more and more people doing it. How do you stand out? And then, but actually one of the things that sort of I've been talking to people about is, venues, gig venues using their social media presence and offering it up to artists as a online venue, essentially. So it's still through that. So if it's I'm trying to think of like, if it's Barfly in Camden or something like that, it's, we give our space to that artist to live stream from our channel, essentially giving them the keys to the Instagram for the day or something, to be live streaming from their channel, from home or from wherever they are, from their, if they have a private a performance space that they use. There are these sort of innovative ways of doing that, so that those artists can still have a platform, those venues can still have some kind of platform, and still have some kind of reason for people to follow them and tune in, and there's all kind of donation models and stuff that can be linked to sort of GoFundMe's instead. So it's not just buying tickets, it's contributing to these venues to keep them open. Or keep them open online. And you're seeing that kind of virtual gig world, virtual gig economy start to develop, which is really exciting. And like I said before, I think that's something that artists should start thinking about And venues should start thinking about, because there's a lot of venues that aren't doing it. There's some really great venues that have jumped on it straight away and are, using it as a way to stay current and relevant and hopefully keep their doors open. So it's
and there's something about that as well, because again, you're asking that question. Well, what is a venue?
Yeah,
and it is a good question.
It's been a physical space historically.
Why not be a virtual space?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a curation process. There's a there's a selection of the artists that get to play. There's a certain standard and probably like a stylistic and like we've talked about archetype, and we've talked about the venues hold as well that artists could easily plug into. Yeah. Digitally as well. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and there'll be sort of like, like I said Barfly and Camden just because it's the one that comes to mind, but they will have, a specific type of audience, specific type of band that will play there, and then there'll be the exact same type of venue for a totally different genre. So I think that's something that artists should definitely be looking at now and finding ways to explore that and make it, again, because, innovation happens when you need to, more often from necessity rather than, necessity is the mother of invention.
For sure.
And now's as good a time as any, if not one of the best times to be doing it,
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
And you can be so creative with it as well. You can really do stuff that you might not be able to do live in a venue. You might have to do, it costs a lot to have effects and stuff like that and lighting and stuff. And actually with filters and stuff, it's amazing what you can do to make your show look great without having to have this physical infrastructure or this physical backlighting or physical lighting rig or stuff like that,
I think one of the best examples, a friend of mine, at least you know him, Chris, and Ben, you may know him. He's a great DJ, and obviously COVID kind of crippled him in terms of his live gigs. So he's made a switch to Twitch.
Yeah, switch to Twitch.
And he got himself together because he's always wanted to do stuff with visuals, right? But if you're in a bar or even if you're in a club, the visuals are usually of the club night and all of that kind of stuff. And he had his own radio station he had his own radio show on a radio station, and obviously couldn't really do a lot of stuff with it there. But he's now kind of carved himself a little space in the virtual world where he is able to have visuals on whilst playing, and it's got a little chat room on the side, and he can chat
interactive as well, directly interactive with fans and with audience.
I think it's like one of those amazing things.
Can he read the room in the way a DJ would read? Like, has he got some feedback from people dancing in their own rooms or whatever? Or?
No, he doesn't have that. However, there's a lot of emojis that make their way onto the chat. So if someone it really loves what's going on, there'll be loads of flame emojis.
There'll be GIFs.
And there are platforms. Yeah, Twitch isn't one necessarily, although, well, actually, I think there you can have sort of. It depends on the way he set it up specifically, but there are ways, whether it's on Twitch, whether it's on Zoom, or whether it's on Google Meet or Facebook. Facebook's their version of essentially the Zoom function, where you can see people and you can have it set up so that I can see what my fans are doing as well. Mm-hmm. So there is that sort of interactive element to it, where it's not where you're performing, obviously, and you can look over and you can see kind of what the fans are doing. And
you can read the room and yeah.
Also, I would say one thing to mention is now that tech companies can see that things are going this way. Obviously, they're going to spend a little bit more time to kind of like get the experiences to be better. Tech companies are going to want you to use their platforms in order to make those shows better. So if you are a band and all of that kind of stuff, you might even be in separate rooms from each other. You can have latency or delay-free jamming that will allow you to have a delay-free gig from each of your rooms.
Right.
And then obviously bring the crowd interaction into that. And there's platforms, I'm sure, that are developing that. And if not, give me a call and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though, because it's a way that artists are then collaborating with each other as well, and sort of, you know, doing like a duetting and, you know, doing that kind of stuff with
Absolutely.
with technology, even when they're in different parts of the world.
Yep.
You know, and that can be, they're playing live with each other in real time, and they're in different parts of the world, and it's, you know, it's that's kind of really exciting. It's stuff that you wouldn't normally have the time when you're on the road, got quite a hectic tour schedule, wouldn't have the time to be able to do stuff like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's
even I'm using stuff which means that I can work with people remotely, so the technology is there. I can record people remotely, and play back stuff to people at really good resolution in real time to people remotely. So the technology is there, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and the technology can influence performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it can influence the whole, you know, how performing develops.
Absolutely, 100%.
So it's exciting that, you know, how it can open up different potential avenues for performing in different types of performing.
Yeah. We're coming very, very close to the time that we've set aside today. Mm-hmm. I wanted to point to just one little piece of something, which is this thing about gaps. Mm-hmm. And there are loads of ways within a performance that gaps are going to appear, right? So one thing, as we were talking about digital performance, for me personally, there's often this kind of annoying bit before the performance begins on a live stream where there's just like a screen. And I'm thinking about gaps. I'm thinking, well, that's a gap, right? Could artists, and this is a thing that will probably get better, how could an artist fill that gap? In a traditional performance, it's obviously the gaps in between songs, or the piece before the band come on stage, or before or at the end, or there's these gaps, these places which aren't where the material is being performed, but there's something else going on there, and they often get forgotten by artists. And so I wanted to just tap in on that. I mean, I have some ideas that, like, in a live performance, I usually dead space does not work. If you've got instruments that need tuning, that's another thing. Like that thing where the guitarist is tuning up and the rest of the band are just kind of hanging around, and then maybe you've got the drummer sort of just hitting their snare drum, or, you know, they're kind of twiddling their thumbs, or they're not really, they haven't thought about what's going on whilst the guitarist needs to be tuning up. That's an example of a gap.
Yeah.
And it needing to be filled. I just wanted to throw that in because there's a question over what do you want to do with your gaps? Look for them, and you know, I mean, have you got anything you want to add in there before we end, or do you want to just take that as a little?
I think that's the one thing I'd say is digitally, that gap there is a chance to interact with the audience. So that's what you do in that time. It's also a chance to have, you know, that sort of holding screen, obviously, where your branding would be if you've got a particular album or a playlist. Maybe it's a playlist you put together that's sort of some of your inspirations. Have that playing in the intro bit. You know, the way that you would front of house at a gig, you'd have, you know, normally a band kind of has like music that they want their fans to be hearing outside, not their music, but like music that they like. You know, you can be plugging those things into the performances.
Yeah,
and it's just another way of sort of creatively. It's another way of kind of getting your sort of archetype and your artist persona there in a creative way, and also keeping the people entertained and not having there just be dead space.
Yep.
One thing that I would say, I always love hearing or seeing, or mostly hearing at the beginning of a gig in real life, is other music. that's related to that artist. So it might not necessarily be their music, obviously, but it might just be music of people they really like in a similar genre, almost like a little DJ set as well. You know, sometimes they do have a warm-up DJ or whatever. That can be cool, along with visually another opportunity for marketing, really, and putting your brand out there. I would say that would be a good one.
Yep.
For you to do.
So think about the gaps, and there's a bunch of ideas been thrown around here about what you can do with your gaps. But, you know, even better, come up with some stuff for yourself that maps what you do. We need to bring this to a close now. So this has been Charting Tracks. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got any feedback for us, we want to hear it. Please subscribe, like, star, do all the bits. You know, depending on what platform you're on. Show us some love. This is a thing I've said every single time for some reason. I don't know whether it's going to stick or what, but show us some love, and we'll show you some back. Bye.
Ciao.